I once had a woman break into my property, steal a storage unit, fill it with inflatable flamingos and wine-scented wreaths, then sue me for selling it back. Her defense? It's for the community. This is the story of how I legally auctioned off a Karen's fake empire right in front of her HOA followers and accidentally started a suburban revolution. You ever open a door and immediately regret your life choices? That was me a few months ago, standing in front of Unit 14 at my storage facility just outside Bakersfield. I'd just come back from a fishing trip and was doing my usual walkthrough when I noticed something off. A brand new padlock on a unit I knew for a fact was vacant. Not just empty, but I'd personally swept the place clean 3 weeks prior. The lock wasn't mine. It was one of those heavy-duty chrome numbers you'd use to guard a bank vault, not some dusty rental storage. Curiosity turned to irritation as I unlocked the adjacent unit to peek through the shared wall vents. And there it was, a bird bath, 3 folding chairs, 2 crates labeled Festival Joy, HOA, and for reasons beyond comprehension, a pink blow-up flamingo pressed against a box of tinsel. I didn't rent that space to anyone, yet someone had clearly moved in, someone bold enough to label their illegal occupation with a paper taped to the door that read, "Reserved by HOA for community use only." Now, I may be a retired civil engineer, but I still keep ledgers tighter than a submarine hatch. I checked everything. Lease agreements, deposits, call logs. Unit 14 was 100% unleased. My first thought was vandalism, or maybe some squatter with a twisted idea of Christmas. But this had the sticky fingerprints of entitlement all over it. And in this town, there was only one group brazen enough to turn my property into their personal garage sale staging area. The Riverbend Estates Homeowners Association. They were right next door, literally. Their fence ran alongside the eastern boundary of my property, and over the years, their requests had escalated from mild, "Can you trim your magnolia tree?" to absurd, "Could you paint your fence a more community-aligned shade of beige?" The worst of them was their president, Janet Cromwell, a woman who wore pearls to mow her lawn and once tried to organize a petition to move a fire hydrant because it clashed with the mailbox aesthetic. I decided to give them the benefit of the doubt once. I walked over to their clubhouse, which looked like someone had tried to build a wedding chapel out of HOA fees and artificial turf. Janet was there, of course, micromanaging the placement of a welcome mat that said, "Peace begins with neighbors," in cursive. I approached her calmly and mentioned that Unit 14 had been unlawfully occupied with items clearly belonging to the H. She blinked at me like I'd interrupted a royal ceremony. "Oh, that," she said, waving a manicured hand. "We just needed a little overflow space for the upcoming fall festival. You're not even using it, are you?" I told her it was private property and use required a lease. She smiled like I'd just told her I'd collect toenails. "Surely, Mr. Brooks, an old man like you can spare a bit of space for your community. Don't be so territorial." Then she turned back to the mat and muttered something about some people just not getting it. I stood there for a beat, trying to decide whether to laugh or call a lawyer. I chose patience. There was something about the way she dismissed me, like I was just background noise in her Pinterest perfect little empire, that flipped a switch in me. This wasn't about a storage unit anymore. This was about control, about how some people think they can get away with anything as long as they smile while doing it. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I walked back across the lot, pulled out my phone, and checked the batteries in my deer cam. If she wanted a little space, I'd give her all the rope she needed to hang herself, with timestamps and video evidence. As I walked past Unit 14 again, I noticed a new addition, a folding sign leaning casually against the door that read, "Riverbend HOA Seasonal Supplies." It was laminated. She'd printed and laminated a sign for a unit she didn't even pay for, like she was christening a new office wing. That was the moment I knew. Janet Cromwell wasn't just squatting, she was expanding. And she had no idea she'd just declared war on a man who once redesigned freeway interchanges for fun. I didn't sleep much that night, not out of rage, though there was plenty of that, but out of curiosity. The kind of curiosity you get when you hear rustling in the attic and you're not sure if it's a rat or a raccoon in a top hat running an opera company. That sign she left on the unit? Laminated. That wasn't improvised. That was premeditated. So at 5 a.m., with a travel mug of coffee and a clipboard of my own, mine actually used for math, I mounted one of my trail cameras on the light pole facing Unit 14. I figured if the HOA was going to turn my storage lot into their seasonal annex, I might as well document the grand opening ceremony. What I captured over the next few days would make a reality TV producer weep with joy. And the first morning, a woman with oversized sunglasses and a Santa hat parked her Prius diagonally across two clearly marked spots and opened the unit like she was unveiling the Ark of the Covenant. She pulled out what looked like a box of fake snow and a bag of glittery pine cones. Later that day, Todd, the HOA's resident vice president of whatever Janet needs, showed up, huffing and puffing with a dolly stacked high with lawn flamingos and what suspiciously resembled a speaker system for a DJ booth. I watched the footage in mild disbelief. Were they decorating a mall or resurrecting a suburban cult? But it wasn't just the decorations. One night, the camera caught Janet herself unlocking the unit and shoving in 3 boxes labeled JC, Attic, Private. Not HOA, not community, just her initials and a sense of superiority so thick it could fog up your glasses. By the third day, she was treating Unit 14 like her personal attic. A folding table went in, followed by a garment bag and a stack of framed photographs. At one point, she stood in the open unit doorway and adjusted her scarf in a mirror propped against a box labeled OJ Gala 22. She might as well have installed curtains. It wasn't just audacious, it was theater. She waved at a neighbor walking past like she was hosting a wine tasting. That neighbor, by the way, told me later that Janet claimed I had donated the unit out of goodwill. Apparently, I was now the Mother Teresa of storage real estate. I didn't say a word, not yet. I was busy copying all my footage onto 3 USB drives and backing them up on cloud storage. If she wanted drama, I was prepping for a Courtroom season finale. It didn't stop there. Around day 5, Todd, ever the loyal HOA pack mule, was caught trying to lock on Unit 15. Now, that one was definitely empty, but secured with one of my high-security Avaloy locks. He jiggled it for a bit, then made a phone call while glancing nervously at the camera. He didn't realize it had night vision. The message was clear. They were expanding. Unit 14 wasn't enough anymore. Janet had tasted unearned real estate and decided to colonize. This wasn't about a storage mistake. This was manifest destiny in pastel capri pants. That night, I sat in my office with my ledger open, carefully marking dates, times, and every box I saw on screen. I wasn't angry. I was focused, calculating, like a chess player about to flip the board and call checkmate with a notarized letter. The final straw came when Janet brought in a velvet rope stand and placed it just outside Unit 14, as if to keep out paparazzi or perhaps to give the space a sense of prestige. It looked like the entrance to a very sad VIP lounge for plastic lawn decor. I walked by just to test the waters, and she actually waved at me and said, "We're doing inventory. Hope that's okay." That was the moment I knew she believed she was untouchable. She wasn't hiding. She was proud. And pride in stories like this always comes before paperwork. Big, official, certified paperwork. What Janet didn't know was that the clock had already started ticking, and in exactly 48 hours, she was going to get her first formal taste of consequence delivered with a smile and a return receipt. 2 days later, right on schedule, I walked up to Unit 14 with a clipboard in one hand and a crisp, legally sound notice in the other. The paper was signed, dated, and stamped twice for dramatic effect. I taped it neatly to the unit's metal door, right next to Janet's velvet rope, which I had to admit gave the moment a bit of theatrical flair. The letter stated, in clear professional language, that the unit was being occupied without a valid lease, and the current tenants had 10 business days to either remove all items or sign a rental agreement retroactive to the date of first use, which, thanks to my camera's timestamps, I now had down to the hour. I included the monthly rate, $150.00 standard across all units, and a copy of my lease agreement, just to be helpful. I also mentioned that failure to comply would result in the items being considered abandoned property under California self-stealing law. The tone, friendly, firm, the kind of friendly that comes with receipts. I didn't have to wait long for a reaction. That afternoon, I spotted Janet strutting toward the unit in kitten heels and a pink windbreaker that looked like it had lost a fight with a flamingo. She saw the notice, read it, and then looked around like someone had just farted in church. Todd trailed behind her, holding 2 lattes and what I assumed were moral support snacks. I stayed out of sight, but close enough to hear her say, "This is harassment. He can't do this. It's for the Her voice cracked like a chandelier under stress. Then, as if to punctuate the moment, she ripped the notice off the door, folded it, and dropped it into her latte. Not the trash, her actual drink. I could only assume it was symbolic. The next day, I received a letter on HOA letterhead, of course, signed solely by Janet Cromwell. No mention of the HOA board, no countersignature from the treasurer, just Janet in her usual loop-de-loop handwriting, informing me that the HOA graciously acknowledges the use of my unit and, in the spirit of neighborhood cooperation, would offer $25.00 a month as a token of appreciation. $25, not even enough to cover the security cameras I'd upgraded because of her antics. She even added a handwritten note at the bottom. "Let's not be petty, Mr. Brooks. After all, what's a little space between neighbors?" I stared at the paper like it had personally insulted my mother. And then, because karma always arrives with a punchline, my game camera caught Todd the very next night trying to open Unit 15 again, this time with what looked like a bent coat hanger and a flashlight in his mouth. It was like watching a raccoon attempt safe cracking. He failed, of course, but the message was clear. They weren't just occupying, they were planning to expand their little empire of glitter and hubris. That night, I backed up all the footage to an encrypted hard drive and made a copy for my lawyer, because if this circus was going to court, I wanted the jury to see every sparkle-covered crime. Still, I hadn't responded to Janet's offer yet. I needed her to think I was wavering, that maybe I'd get tired and back down. People like her count on that. They feed on silence and assumptions. But I wasn't done, not even close. My next move wouldn't be a letter or a camera. It would be a legal line drawn so deep she'd need a ladder to climb out of it. Because when you try to run your HOA like a monarchy, you'd better be ready for a revolution, led by a guy with a spreadsheet and a 3-step plan for revenge. The letter went out the next morning, this time certified mail, return receipt requested, emailed to the HOA's official contact address, and, for good measure, hand-delivered into the decorative faux mailbox outside their clubhouse, nestled between a dying fern and a concrete gnome dressed as Uncle Sam. I wasn't leaving any room for "I didn't get your message" games. The letter was direct, formal, and legally tight. It referenced Janet's offer, if you could call it that, of $25.00 a month, rejected it unequivocally, and restated my terms: $150.00 per month, backdated to the exact date of first unauthorized use, which I now knew was the day she wheeled in the flamingo. I also clearly cited the California Business and Professions Code regarding abandoned property and warned that failure to respond within 7 calendar days would result in initiation of legal proceedings and public auction, as allowed under law. I even included a printed still image of her opening the unit herself, just beneath the text that read, "Evidence on file." For the first 5 days, nothing. Radio silence, which honestly was exactly what I was hoping for. In HOA speak, silence isn't apathy, it's arrogance. She wasn't just ignoring me, she was gambling that I wouldn't dare follow through, that I'd flinch first. What she didn't realize is I've sat through 28 years of zoning hearings and environmental impact reports. Patience isn't just a virtue in my world, it's a weapon. On the 6th day, I got an email, no header, no logo, just text. It read, "Mr. Brooks, your continued harassment is noted. The HOA is busy preparing for our Harvest Jubilee, and we will address your concerns when time permits. Until then, please refrain from further threats. Regards, Janet Cromwell." No title, no board acknowledgement, just her, like she was personally offended that I had the audacity to expect compensation for her unsanctioned suburban annex. That same night, I did another walkthrough. Unit 14's door was slightly ajar, just enough to reveal that not only had they added more boxes, but someone had wheeled in a small table with a glitter banner reading VIP supplies. Through the crack, I could see what looked like a box labeled Gala Candles and a wrapped canvas painting of a woman holding a wine glass in front of a fountain. It might have been Janet. I didn't want to know, but what really made my eyebrow twitch was a small clipboard taped to the wall inside the unit with the heading "Borrow Log." She had created a checkout system for contraband inside my property. Like this was a library for overpriced yard ornaments. The audacity wasn't just rising, it was weaponized. So I called Ben Carter. Ben is one of those rare lawyers who actually enjoys legal footnotes and once wrote a blog post called 10 Fun Facts About Property Liens. I knew I was in good hands. I sent him all the documentation, photos, letters, emails, even the velvet rope sign. He called me back after half an hour and said, "Arthur, this is textbook. You're covered 6 ways from Sunday. But here's what you do. Post the auction notice now. Make it official. Follow every step to the letter. Let her walk into the trap she built." So I did. The next morning, I had a formal notice of lien and intent to sell printed in bold, easy-to-read font. It listed the unit number, total rent owed, auction date 3 weeks out, and location. I posted it on the door, mailed it, emailed it, and took out an ad in the Bakersfield Chronicle Classifieds under public notice. The headline, Sale of Abandoned Storage Contents, Riverbend HOA. By now, I knew Janet had seen the posting. My camera caught her standing in front of it later that evening, holding her little designer purse like a shield and muttering something to Todd, who nodded like a man being held hostage by a cupcake committee. She didn't tear it down this time. She didn't even touch it. She just stood there staring at it for a long, long while, then walked away in silence. That silence, that wasn't ignorance anymore. That was realization. And if I had to bet, I'd say it was the first time it dawned on her that this petty old man was serious and he was about to put her holiday kingdom on the auction block, glitter and all. Auction day arrived like a small-town parade with just enough chaos to keep things interesting. I showed up an hour early, made coffee strong enough to file paperwork by itself, and set up a folding table by the front gate with a clipboard, a cash box, and a laminated sign that read, "Auction registration, cash only, no returns, no drama." I'd hired a local auctioneer named Dale Bishop, retired rodeo announcer, voice like gravel in a whiskey bottle, who'd done storage sales all over Kern County. Dale took one look inside Unit 14 and said, "Well, damn, looks like Santa crashed into a wine bar." I just smiled and handed him the key. Meanwhile, the crowd started rolling in. Some curious neighbors, a couple of guys with pickup trucks, and at least 3 people I recognized from the HOA who were definitely not supposed to be there, probably looking to rescue their flamingos. At 9:57 a.m., right on cue, the white Cadillac SUV came screeching around the corner like it was trying to reenact Fast and Furious Retirement Edition. Out stepped Janet, dressed in what could only be described as a power pantsuit forged from the fabric of pure indignation. Pink, sparkly, and shoulder padded like a linebacker heading to brunch. Todd was with her, looking like he wanted to crawl into a recycling bin, and another woman I vaguely recognized as their treasurer trailed behind, clutching a clipboard in her last shred of hope. Janet stormed toward the unit, lips tight, voice already escalating before her heels hit the pavement. "This is theft. You cannot sell our property. I will sue you into next week," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. Dale didn't flinch. "Ma'am, do you have proof of payment or a signed lease?" She blinked. "No, but..." Dale cut her off with a professional drawl. "Then step aside, we're opening the unit." The moment Dale rolled up the door, gasps erupted like someone had just revealed the ending to a murder mystery. It was a glitter-filled mess. Holiday lights tangled like spaghetti, fake pumpkins, HOA president signs, 2 full-size cardboard turkeys wearing sunglasses, and a crate of champagne flutes that definitely weren't plastic. And there, tucked in the back, was a stack of boxes labeled JC Private. That was the nail in her sparkly coffin. Janet turned beet red and hissed at Todd, "I told you to move those." He shrugged like a man who had run out of both excuses and willpower. The crowd didn't need any more convincing. The auction began. Dale was born for this. "All right, folks, who wants to start the bid on this patriotic garden gnome with suspicious HOA ties? $5? 10? Laughter broke out. The first few items, tinsel trees, wreaths, boxes labeled backup snow, went for pocket change. But then came the real prize. A custom BBQ grill Janet had claimed belonged to the community. It sold for $400, 0 cents to a guy wearing a shirt that said, "Meat over HO." Then the golf club's high-end, monogrammed, and obviously not whole property, sold for $650, 0 cents, to a local coach who high-fived his wife after Janet looked like she was about to pass out. She started pacing in circles, muttering legal threats until the police arrived. 2 officers calmly asked for an explanation. I handed them a folder thicker than a wedding cake. Certified mail receipts, lease agreements, timestamps, photographs. One officer, whom I'd met at a neighborhood watch meeting, flipped through the documents and turned to Janet. "Ma'am, he's followed every legal step required. This is a civil matter. We're only here to keep the peace." Janet tried one more time, "But those are community items." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Including the box labeled JC Vacation Photos?" That shut her down like a flip breaker. She stood there, seething, mascara starting to melt under the morning sun. While her empire was sold off for pennies, by the end of the auction, Unit 14 was empty, swept clean, every trace of glitter, power, and entitlement boxed, bid, and gone. Dale handed me a final tally. After deducting my legal fees, back rent, advertising costs, and Dale's modest commission, there was a surplus of $287.56. I had it printed into a check made out to Riverbend Estates HOA, just for the record. I walked over to Janet, who was now sitting on the curb like someone who'd just been evicted from her own parade. "Here," I said, holding out the envelope. "Balance from the auction. You're welcome to log it in your community goodwill fund." She didn't take it, but the treasurer did. Trembling hands, silent nod. Janet didn't say a word. She just got up, dusted off her pantsuit, and climbed back into her Escalade. But as she slammed the door shut, she stared straight through me with that look. The one that says, "This isn't over." I didn't blink, because I knew it was, at least for now. What she didn't know was the real storm hadn't even started yet. 3 days later, I found a thick envelope stuffed awkwardly into my mailbox, the kind of envelope that always smells like litigation. And sure enough, it was stamped from a local law firm with a name that sounded like a trust fund had grown legs: Crawford, Dean, and Weller, LLP. Inside was a formal complaint: Riverbend Estates Homeowners Association versus Ethan Brooks. The charges: unlawful seizure, unauthorized sale of community property, emotional distress, trespass, and a particularly dramatic claim of public humiliation. The damages they sought were laughable: $47,000, 0 cents, in compensation for irreplaceable HOA property, and a written apology. I actually laughed out loud at that last part. A written apology from me to the woman who turned my storage unit into her personal Pottery Barn annex. That was rich. I called Ben Carter the moment I finished reading it. Ben, my lawyer, didn't even try to sound surprised. "Well, I'll give her this," he said. "She's persistent." We spent the next 2 hours reviewing everything again. Every letter, every time-stamped photo, every email, the auction receipts, even the security cam footage of Todd trying to pick the lock on Unit 15 with a hanger. "They don't have a leg to stand on," Ben said flatly. "But you know what the fun part is?" I didn't. "Discovery," he said, grinning. "They've opened the door. Now we get to walk through it. I want everything: HOA meeting minutes, expense reports, inventory logs, and especially anything with Janet's signature on it. If she used HOA funds for personal items, we'll find it, and we'll make sure the court finds it too." The first cracks showed almost immediately. During discovery, Ben requested all HOA documentation related to the use of my storage unit: meeting notes, board approvals, signed agreements, anything to prove that the occupation had been sanctioned. What we got back was a stack of unnumbered Word documents, some handwritten notes on stationery that said Janet's office, and a PDF titled Holiday Plans 2023-Working Draft. Not a single board vote, no receipts, just vague language like secure temporary storage and space generously provided. No one could even confirm who had approved the storage decision, because no one had. Ben's eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas. "She acted unilaterally," he said, practically bouncing. "Now we prove she did it for herself, not the HOA." Things escalated fast when we deposed the treasurer, a woman named Connie who looked like she hadn't slept since the auction. Under oath, she admitted that most of the decorations in Unit 14 had come from Janet's home over the years and were loaned for events. She also admitted that Janet had never informed the board of the unit's use until after my first letter arrived. Then came Todd, nervous as ever, who confirmed Janet had told him to find space that doesn't cost us a dime and to ignore the old man if he makes noise. He even confessed to trying to access another unit and described it as just scouting. When asked if he had permission to do that, he shrugged and said Janet said it was all handled. It wasn't a deposition. It was a slow motion collapse. But the piece de resistance came when Ben subpoenaed Janet's financial disclosures as HOA president. Buried in a list of community enhancement expenditures was a $649.00 purchase labeled Decorative Accents for Gala Ambience, and another for $1,200.00 from an online boutique, Riverbend Vintage Vibes. A quick search confirmed it was an Etsy shop registered to Janet Cromwell. That's right, she had been selling HOA purchase decor online for personal profit, all while storing her unsold inventory in my unit, unpaid. I stared at the printout for a long moment before saying, well, I'll be damned. I've been housing a side hustle. Ben grinned. Now we show the judge. Let's see if she still wants that apology. That night, I walked past the now empty Unit 14 and looked at the faint tape mark where Janet had once hung her OA Community Use Only sign. It was gone, scrubbed clean, like the mess had never happened. But the court date was approaching, and Janet's glitter empire was starting to look less like a harmless overreach and more like what it truly was, a one-woman OA racket. And she'd walked right into the spotlight herself, clipboard raised, flamingos in tow, and by the time we stepped into the courtroom, the energy in the room was already leaning in my favor. Not because I'd prepared a brilliant speech or worn a power tie. I hadn't. I wore the same brown blazer I used when buying mulch at Home Depot. But because the stack of evidence we brought in could have doubled as a step stool. Ben Carter wheeled in a rolling cart. Yes, an actual cart, filled with documentation, including photos, lease agreements, deposition transcripts, and a side-by-side comparison of Janet's Etsy listings with items photographed inside Unit 14. On our side, facts, law, and 3 types of receipts. On theirs, a very tired-looking lawyer and Janet Cromwell in a beige blouse so stiff it could have held a deposition by itself. She sat rigidly upright, hands clenched in her lap, staring daggers at the judge like she was about to demand a personal throne. Janet's lawyer tried to open with moral high ground, describing her as a long-standing pillar of the community and claiming the auction had traumatized the HOA board and compromised neighborhood harmony. Ben didn't even blink. When it was our turn, he simply walked the judge through a linear timeline: unauthorized use, documented notice, ignored warnings, and illegal auction conducted under full compliance with California. He laid out the law so cleanly, even the stenographer looked impressed. And then came the real show, the video stills. Ben clicked through images on a projector, one by one. Janet unloading her personal boxes, labeling them JC, attic, waving into the camera while posing with a stack of decorations. When the photo of Todd attempting to break into Unit 15 appeared, Janet visibly twitched. Ben turned to the judge and said, "This isn't negligence, Your Honor. This is deliberate misuse." And it wasn't the HOA that signed off on it. It was Janet Cromwell. Then came the financial records. Ben presented a printout from Etsy showing recent listings from Riverbend Vintage Vibes, including one item titled Gala Ambience Wreath, $59.00, like new. He highlighted a charge made on the HOA's account to purchase wreaths and candles, matched with her shop listings the following week. She used HOA funds to stock her online store, Ben stated plainly. She then used my client's property to warehouse that inventory, and when confronted, she filed a frivolous lawsuit to silence him. The room went still. Janet tried to interrupt, mumbling something about community outreach and shared benefit, but the judge held up a hand. "Miss Cromwell, you'll have your turn." Her lawyer leaned in and whispered, probably something like, "Stop talking." To make matters worse for her, the HOA treasurer, Connie, had submitted an affidavit ahead of the hearing admitting that no board vote had been conducted and that several members were unaware of any lease agreement or financial arrangement with Mr. Brooks. A few residents even attended the hearing, seated behind me, murmuring things like, "I knew she was shady," and "That's where the gala money went." When Todd took the stand and recited the exact words Janet had told him, "Just put it in there, he'll never notice," it was the final nail in the glitter-covered coffin. The judge asked only one question, Ms. Cromwell. Do you have any documentation, any at all, proving the HOA authorized this storage arrangement or the use of funds for these items? Janet sat frozen for a moment, then slowly shook her head. When the judge ruled it was swift and unambiguous, the lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she couldn't bring it back, and the HOA was ordered to cover all my legal fees, including Ben's time and filing costs. The court also recommended that the HOA conduct an internal audit due to concerning financial irregularities. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply turned to Ben and said, she's going to hate this more than the auction. He nodded, and it's not even the worst part. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? He smirked. Wait until her own board finds out what she cost them. And just like that, we packed up our files and rolled out. But the fallout was only beginning. The next Riverbend Estates HOA meeting was, by all accounts, less of a gathering and more of an exorcism. Word of the lawsuit's failure and the court's findings had spread like wildfire. Residents showed up in droves, some angry, some smug, all ready for blood. Reports came back to me from neighbors who attended, people demanding a vote of no confidence, yelling about misuse of dues, and someone even holding up one of the auctioned-off flamingos with a sign that read, Ho's own asset. Janet tried to talk. She was booed loudly. Todd resigned mid-meeting. Connie was already talking to lawyers. The HOA voted 42-3 to remove Janet from her position, effective immediately, and just like that, the crown slipped, the clipboard fell, and the queen pin of Riverbend was dethroned in front of her entire kingdom. Janet disappeared from public view almost overnight. One day she was leading the HOA like it was a suburban empire, and the next she was just another name on a mailbox. Nobody checked anymore. Her Cadillac Escalade vanished from the cul-de-sac. Her meticulously trimmed hedges grew wild within a week, and the last known appearance she made was a Facebook post titled Stepping Away to Focus on Family and Self-Growth, accompanied by a blurry sunset and a Bible quote about seasons change. But the real reason was printed loud and clear in the minutes of the emergency HOA audit, which, thanks to California transparency laws and a few very motivated neighbors, went semi-viral on a local Bakersfield subreddit. The audit confirmed everything: unauthorized spending, fabricated approvals, and over $3,000, 0 cents in event decor, traced directly to Janet's side business. They even discovered that several community donations had been quietly diverted into what one member labeled Janet's Glitter Fund. The new board, now helmed by a CPA named Martin, who wore suspenders and blinked a lot, filed an official complaint to the state's Department of HOA Oversight. Apparently, that's a real thing. Janet was charged with breach of fiduciary duty and misuse of community funds, and while the penalties weren't jail-worthy, they came with stiff financial fines and a multi-year ban from holding any HOA office in the state. Martin, to his credit, stopped by my storage facility not long after. He apologized on behalf of the board, shook my hand with both of us, and said, "We read everything you submitted, every timestamp, every receipt. Honestly, it was kind of beautiful." I offered him a coffee and told him if he ever needed a place to store holiday decorations, I had units available at market rate. We both laughed, mostly. As for me, life went back to normal, quiet, predictable, and refreshingly low on unsolicited lawn flamingos. Unit 14 was eventually leased to a young couple who sold vintage car parts online, and for the record, they actually signed a lease. I upgraded the facility security system, reinforced all exterior lighting, and replaced the old keypad with one that didn't think 1234 was acceptable security. The camera stayed, just in case. Every once in a while, a curious neighbor would walk by and ask, "You're the guy who auctioned off the HOA president's stuff, right?" I never said yes. I just nodded and said, "Let's just say I prefer written agreements." The only trace of Janet left in Riverbend was a faded campaign poster someone had taped over the community bulletin board. It read, "Strong leadership for a brighter tomorrow. Janet Cromwell." Someone had scribbled underneath in Sharpie, "More like wrong leadership for a glitter-fueled dumpster fire." I didn't write it, but I framed it, hung it right above my desk, and every time I glance at it, I remember the lesson buried beneath the storage bins and velvet ropes. Entitlement has a shelf life. And sometimes all it takes is one man, a trail camera, and a really good paper trail to take it down. The last I heard, Janet had sold her home in a quiet off-market deal, reportedly at a loss. Rumor had it she moved to Arizona to start fresh. Maybe she did. Maybe she's somewhere out there now, telling her new neighbors how she once ran a neighborhood so well even the storage units bowed to her. Maybe she's even started another Etsy shop, Desert Bloom Decor, or Cactus Vibes Collective. If so, I hope she remembers this story. Not because I need her to regret it, but because stories like hers always end the same way. One overreach too far, one neighbor too organized, and one clipboard too many. Sometimes the biggest battles don't happen in courtrooms or boardrooms. They unfold quietly behind velvet ropes, laminated signs, and unchecked entitlement. What started as one borrowed storage unit became a symbol of something bigger. The way power, when left unchallenged, can rot from the inside out. But the beauty of this story isn't just in the revenge, it's in the method. Calm, legal, documented. No shouting matches, no drama explosions, just facts, receipts, and patience. That's the real lesson here. You don't have to yell to win. You don't have to stoop to their level. You just have to stand your ground, know your rights, and let the truth speak louder than the clipboard. So if you've ever felt steamrolled by a Karen in power, remember this. The system may be slow, but when wielded right, it's sharp. Just drop a comment if you've faced your own HOA madness. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay prepared.